the Talentless podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for this one actually, because it keeps coming up and I see about 700 LinkedIn posts about that particular topic every day. And we're talking about AI and fraud and candidates and all the wonky resume stuff that we see out there. And we have a great guest. I'm going to let her introduce herself. So I will turn it over to her.
Well, hello. Well, thank you so much for having me. Definitely a pleasure being here. This is Maryam Mahdaviani, and I'm the founder of Attesto. At Attesto, we are building the trust layer for hiring. So we work closely with talent acquisition teams to use various data and signals and models to identify candidates that are fit and also are authentic, and doing so in a transparent way, in a responsible way, and also in a way that it's not compromising the candidate experience. Those are all very important points, as well as, just finding the right candidates and filling in the position. Well, pleasure meeting you and pleasure being here.
Yeah. And just so everyone knows, before Attesto, Maryam has an extensive career in strategy, operations, team building inside of high growth companies such as Green Dot and Honey. And so she's founded multiple companies. She's not just technical, she's practical. And I'm excited for her to be here. Ashley, if you would like to explain some more, I'm glad to turn it over to you.
I'm actually really excited to learn from Maryam because I feel like the only tactics TA has right now is like, if you put an M dash in that resume, then you're fake. And it's like, that is not a qualification or a disqualification metric. And there is no way to use that as a proper validation point if the person is a bot or not. So I am actually super excited to learn a little bit more ways of how TA can really strategize themselves as people in this spot to maybe avoid that. And then also kind of learning like, hey, what's happening on the market? Like, what are all of the candidates doing? Because I'm not going to lie, as a human, being overemployed in America, I'm not necessarily against it. Sorry, but it's the game we have to play. It's the capitalism they set us up with. So I'm a little mixed boat on this, not going to lie, as a person and then as a TA professional. But yeah, hey, take us away as far as kind of, what is happening and why does it matter what's happening with AI and what is going to be its impact, would you say? To Maryam, sorry,
it's
just to make it clear.
Fascinating. No, I got that. It is fascinating how our world is changing, and it's not, limited to hiring. Overall, like we see this flood of content generation, what is fake, what is real, like we see that everywhere, right? So for talent acquisition and hiring in particular, the past few years, we felt like, okay, well, there are a number of tools available to candidates. It started with like Easy Apply so that, they don't have to go to each individual website and submit a resume, submit a cover letter. And there were all these tools available that they could apply on their behalf or help them with the daunting experience of, going through the application process. So it started there and we were like, okay, perfect. Like, the technology is helping with the experience. On the other side, okay, now there's like a flood of applicants coming in. And I'm not talking about the fake one, just because, it was easier for candidates to apply, partly because of the tools that they have now, and then partly because companies are recruiting globally. And even if it's within the US or, within the region, a lot of them recruit remotely and build remote teams. And because of that, there's like a much bigger talent pool. And we thought, okay, well, now with AI, we can help TA teams to become more productive. So the first, purpose was very much, okay, how AI can solve the somewhat old problems that we have. So now the volume was higher and AI was helping with productivity, solving more or less older problems. Then, like last year, we started seeing now the new problems that are actually created very much by AI. So it was not just AI on the candidate side or tools on the candidate side were helping them to apply, or the mindset of companies that it's okay and it's productive to build remote teams. But now it's like, okay, now AI is available to fraudsters and AI is available to bots. And because of the culture that we have with a lot of misinformation and AI generated content, even the non-fraudsters, like the actual candidates, also feel like, okay, I have to compete, I have to show myself, it's easier, and why not? That I also use AI to inflate my resume and maybe make up things here and there, right? So we started seeing like, okay, now the new problems that AI actually introduced, and it's inevitable, right? Like, it's there, we see it everywhere, and now we are building, now these like new solutions on how to combat that, right? How to actually find those authentic candidates, because there's still a lot of them out there, but in that flood of applications, you have a lot of noise of unqualified ones, and then also we have a lot of noise of seemingly qualified candidates that are actually not authentic. And there are just various levels of lying that I would love to go deeper and talk about the different types and incentives and so forth.
Yeah, Mary, I was just about to say to you, like, when we're talking about candidate fraud, we're not just talking about inflated resumes. We're talking about like deep fake. Person shows up, it's not even the person in these interviews, fabricated, experience. I was on a call the other day and someone was like, oh, well, how are we going to stop proxy interviews and all this crazy stuff? And I'm like, oh, it's gotten really insane. So let's go deep on that. When we talk about candidate fraud, what are we actually talking about? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, sometimes it feels like a CSI. When we are looking at some of the cases and like learning about like things that they're doing, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes it actually feels like like a kind of a thriller to kind of go through them and figure out actually what these candidates are doing, what gets reported to us. What we are seeing is that, okay, as I said, there is a pretty wide spectrum. We see candidates that are, or I wouldn't say even candidates, like actors, right? Because these actors could be people, it could be bots, right? So we see actors that are completely fabricating information. So they would create a LinkedIn profile, would create a resume, it would create a website, even like maybe a GitHub profile. They would like create a lot of different profiles kind of supporting this actor, this individual, and applying with that fabricated, like a set of profiles, right? So we see that. And then behind these fabricated profiles, we could have someone overseas that is going to be doing the work. It could be a team. I mean, the incentive is another. Like why they're doing it is a different topic that we could talk about it. But so this is one type, like all the completely fabricated personalities and fabricated profile. That's one type. And then we see also actors that are impersonating other people. So like we have like a person or an actor using a real authentic LinkedIn profile that doesn't belong to this person. We even have cases where they use a phone number, the phone number associated to the owner of that LinkedIn profile. But then at the time a phone screening is getting scheduled, the candidate or this actor would say, okay, can you actually use this other phone number for the call? Because it's like an email communication. So they use their own email. So it's like an email communication. And, they get a call from the recruiter saying, okay, your resume looks great. We would love to talk with you. And they're like, oh, by the way, can you actually just call me on this other number? And
This
this is
is
like their
so
own number.
insane. Like, okay, we're going to get into the incentive to do this because I truly think there's a lot of effort going in.
I
So there's
mean,
got to be.
it's worth the ROI, personally, in my opinion. But I will say, even the
Then,
proxy interviewer of call someone else on a call, that was happening in IT recruiting like in 2011. Like that is a part of recruiting that has always been the case, where it's like you could have
Right.
someone that isn't the actual person. And it's what brings about, I mean, checks and things like that, is this
Yeah.
verification of human. But one that you hit on that I find to be just so interesting is the one where it is like an actual AI avatar representing the person and interviewing on its behalf, and can actually show up to Teams meetings and things like that. Like that to me is, that's where it's wild, because then you could truly be overemployed with all of these fake AI people that you've made, and not us giving suggestions on this podcast of how you can build your own company via other orgs by having your little bots work other places. But that's wild. So yeah,
It
keep
hasn't
going.
got that far yet. It hasn't, actually,
Oh,
it
not
hasn't
yet.
got that far yet. I'm
I'm
just
just dreaming. I'm telling
no.
people where to go.
We are talking about like basically fabricating profiles, but then a person or different people showing up for the interview. And we're talking even like, okay, someone starting the work, but this person, could be, sitting in India and claiming, or, sitting in North Korea and claiming that is like a US resident, like kind of getting that job, right? So that's like what we're saying. Like, we're not
Yeah.
talking about like completely like having avatars coming, because it's still like, there are ways, and if like humans are interviewing avatars, they can, at this point, we can all like recognize that they're actually avatars.
Sure is not far behind though. Right now I can clone myself to talk,
Yeah.
right? So it can't be that far off, So I find the whole thing fascinating. So I do want to get into the incentive part of this a little bit though. So I'm this fake profile, or I have someone interview that's not me. Like, what is the incentive? At some point there's got to be an endpoint, right? Maybe they need to get verified through their I-9 or whatever. What is the incentive? How are they collecting money or comp from this?
So they could use like a social security number that could not, like, it's possible that it doesn't match in the beginning, and it could take months until they get kind of kicked out of the
Yeah.
company because of the mismatch. Because first, they would say it's a mismatch, they will pay them. It might be like a few cycles because they get a chance to correct it and so forth. And for months, they can get paid. So all of that
Yeah.
is worthwhile for them. And so part of it is like purely financial, because, they are living, like in South America, in India, like a salary in the US, also like, a laptop and other things that come with onboarding could be valuable. The other way that they would do that is they might actually set things up with a person in the US. So kind of have a collaborator. So this
Mm,
person is receiving the salaries, but then the work is getting done by the like actual expert that is overseas. That's also another thing that we are seeing. Sometimes you also see, cases that I mentioned, but we are also seeing people who get multiple jobs, but then outsource. So that's a
yeah.
slightly different, but we also see that. We also have like the very evil cybersecurity cases as well. I mean, there was like the North Korea case with
Yeah.
Sony, or depending on the company, they would want to have access to their data. So they actually have on one side of the spectrum, we are talking about like serious security concerns for the company, like, and that would be their incentive as well. I mean, all of the above, you're not just talking about like a financial ways, we're also talking about security concerns, like all of this. But then in some cases, it's more extreme, because like the North Korean government can be
Right.
behind it, right?
Right.
So we have those cases as well. One other case of fraud that is still very common that I didn't get to talk about is the people that feel like, okay, I don't have the experience. I mean, you're not talking about just slightly inflating, like extremely inflating the
Right.
resume. We see that also a lot. So that's actually still the majority of cases that you're
Mm,
seeing. Like, for example, the person is like a hairdresser or a realtor, would apply for a BD job and makeup, in his or her resume and LinkedIn profile could say that, okay, well, works at these companies and has had these experiences. So we are also seeing still like a majority of more kind of standard lying in the resume, but it has become much easier for them to do it with AI, because they just pass the job description with some prompt, perfect resume gets generated. They use AI also like to answer some of the questions. We also see like they get help from people. So like kind of another common thing is that different people show for the interview, or the person who shows up for the for work is different from people or person who got interviewed. So we have that as well going on. So in that way, it is actually like truly the person's name, right? So it's the person's name, but like they claim that they worked at company ABC. It's not true, or maybe they worked at company ABC, but not the role that they claim they have.
Interesting.
Absolutely. I mean,
I
that's
think
where that's been happening for so long, but it's just different now in AI.
that I'm actually hearing here is like it almost seems like the social footprint of the person supersedes what their actual tactical like skill set and performance is.
Right.
Being that you can use AI to create a social media footprint with everything that you need to support your fake resume. And recruiters are actually valuing that more than what can this person, like we don't actually have assessment processes that surface their actual performance, skill set, and competencies. It seems like we're heavily relying on this resume, quote unquote, narrative, quote unquote, social proof of what it is, and relying heavier on labels and logos versus what a person can actually do. And honestly, in like one fail swoop, I feel like Maryam just pointed out everything that's absolutely wrong with talent. It's like we're heavily
I was about to
relying on
say,
things that literally don't matter. The entire talent. The entire reason is because we assess based off of boo-hooey, silly
yeah,
LinkedIn. Do they have this? Do they have that? And now we're almost at a
yeah,
point to where like the only way you could probably actually validate is this person a real person or not is through those social proof points. Do they have more than 3 posts? Has this LinkedIn been alive more than one day? Like all of those
right.
different things that you're going to have to look into. Another thing that Maryam mentioned, which is so accurate, she called out North Korea. So I've known a lot of people that they did have an avatar that interviewed and they got hired and they started. And the only reason that they found out they were a fake person is because the bank account was going to North Korea. Everything else, they passed I-9, passed all of that other stuff. So they were able to basically get a social that matched whatever avatar they had enough. And then they just wire the bank account. And then, yeah, they had people on the back end doing all the work while the avatar was the spokesman. And like, this was 2025. Like, this was last year. So the fact that it's happening, it's possible, it's annoying because it's almost like inevitable. Now we're going to have to go look at those
Right.
social data points to make sure that they exist. And it's like we were already too heavy circulating on it to where we used it as a bypass and a mechanism of process to not actually assess talent, but to just rely on other people's assessment of talent, i.e., the other label or logo that they worked for, to say that will qualify them for this.
You're, absolutely right. But, there were a few months ago, like our models to detect fraud, they were heavily relying on how many followers, for example, they have
Mm,
on LinkedIn, or like getting like clues. And then now a lot of fraudsters, they actually have a lot of followers as well.
I was
So
about to say they
that's
probably
not
pay for them and cross pollinate.
exactly. So they have that. LinkedIn has this verification, for example, but a lot of times, even like verified ones are also fraudsters because the way it works is, it could have like one of the companies, and company could be a made up company with a domain address associated to that company. And if they send an email and verify through that email address, they get verified as if they, verified they worked at that company. So that also
Yeah.
doesn't work. I mean, LinkedIn has an effort of going through, profiles and removing fake ones, but we see a lot of fraudsters that get away there as
Yeah.
well. So more and more, like what we're doing is that it's not just one thing that would basically say, okay, this person is fraudster or not. And then you gotta keep in mind that in the middle of this, you might lose also good candidates as well if you're just looking
Yeah.
at
Right.
one thing. Right. I mean, another like big signal is like voice over IP. If the phone number is voice over IP, is this like a big signal that a candidate is fraudster or not? The thing is, there are a lot of actually good candidates, especially in software development. They use voice over IP even for their personal use, not just having a separate voice over IP for jobs. So they do that. It's pretty common. So then you would lose that, right? So it's not just one single
Yeah.
thing. And to your point, like going to that social proof, like going to LinkedIn profile, going and doing a Google search on the candidate, this, that, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time. Previously, like, a year ago, I was like basically like talking on like, on a podcast or like talking with customers and saying, okay, how AI can read, thousands of resumes for you, right? So it was about, okay, the recruiter, for example, quickly looking at the resume, and a lot of time, the recruiters are like very efficient. They can just like look at a few like things, and then like a few seconds they could say the resume is a fit or not, right? So like most of the work that they were doing, they were not doing these like cross-referencing and a deep research on the candidate. They're just looking at the resume. Okay, is the resume a good fit for the role? Because the number of fraud cases was not significant. But now the TA team, they have to do like this deep research, like a mini background search. The thing is, you don't want to also introduce a lot of friction for your candidate, because then you would lose the good ones, right? Like you don't want to put them through a background check at that stage in the top of the funnel. So the recruiter has to like this is what Attesto agents do. Like it looks at their LinkedIn profile. If they have a GitHub, for example, for software development, it looks at their GitHub.
This episode of the Talentless podcast is brought to you by Do Better Consulting. Hiring is broken. Job searches are broken. And honestly, most career advice out there is just recycled nonsense. Do Better Consulting exists for people who are done guessing. They work with mid to senior leaders, founders, and talent teams to get clear on their signal, how they show up in the market, how they hire, and how decisions actually get made. No fluff, no templates just to say you have them. Just strategy, structure, and honest feedback that actually works. If you're tired of spinning, it might be time to do better. Head to dobetterconsulting.net.
Some data online, like public data on this candidate, then it looks at the patterns of data and the information in the resume itself. So, for example, a very classic case is like a candidate that would say he is an expert in Ruby on Rails, but worked at Google and Meta, and Google and Meta don't use Ruby on Rails. So, and those are the only places that the person worked at. So this is like, okay, well, obvious. This is like a mismatch, right? So kind of identifying those mismatches, or, if the timelines don't match and so forth. Then Attesto also does a phone lookup. Like a phone number has a name associated with it that is actually the candidate's name. That's like could be a good, strong signal, because at this point it's harder to make that up. The pattern of that. It's a lot of work. I'm not saying the human cannot do that, but it's just it takes so much time, and it's also error prone.
Yeah. What were you about to say, Des? I'll go after
I
you.
was just going to ask, so if I'm a head of talent, this shows up in Attesto shows up in my workflow at top of funnel, right? It can go, now is it integrated into my ATS? I'm just trying to understand the mechanics behind it, Maryam.
Absolutely. We integrated in the workflow.
Right.
And, I think it's not just like unique to Attesto or even for AI in TA. For any implementation of AI in enterprises and mid-size and larger companies, it becomes successful if you incorporate agents within the workflow instead of like sending them to a completely separate platform and so forth. It sits in the ATS. It integrates, with the email and Slack and, for example, Teams for communication with the team. But as the candidates come through, or if Attesto is going through the talent pool, it would review the application, it would do the research on the candidate, and has these like tags and notes that, okay, whether the candidate is like, let's say, suspicious of fraud and why, because of this information, Attesto thinks it's suspicious of fraud, or is it clear of fraud, why? And then we have a growing number of verified clear and verified fraud cases as well. So as we also verify by our internal team or the TA teams that actually work with Attesto verify these cases. So we have a growing number of them. And in this case, because we see that a lot, that a fraud actor applies to hundreds of jobs at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. So if we could verify it once, then we can help the same company, and then we can help other companies as well.
Makes sense.
So, and we continuously train, because the patterns of fraud change. And this is something that is going to continue to change, right? Because the AI is going to change, the candidate's behavior is going to change. So we're going to be continuously sort of training the models that are using, the collective, like the collection of signals, and then making an assessment. Okay, is there enough confidence to say this candidate is suspicious of fraud or clear of fraud? So that's how we're doing. And we do have the plans to also have it in the interview. So we are working on now also adding, the Attesto agents in the interview to be able to provide tips to the interviewer afterwards. So this way, kind of throughout the hiring, Attesto can help catching the fraud and help identifying the authentic candidate.
Since it's in the ATS, because one of the tools that, and this is me nerding out right now, sorry to the audience if they're looking for specific things here. But one of the things that I thought was really cool that I heard some people integrating, and if you already do this, and this is like spoilers, my bad, but they actually, as the resume comes in, track the IP address, and then with every interaction that they do in the system, the IP address is like rechecked, and so that way, if it ever shows like one off in North Korea, in somewhere else or anything like that, it like bumps it up and reports them. Is there like a process in there with that too? Because that's the one thing that I will say I found the most interesting, is because even ATSs themselves are trying to, how do we incorporate things that actually make this a preventative, or we can give them a high, medium, low flag? And so one of the ones that I heard was, IP address checking on every single thing that they touch or is sent in, since it's already in the ATS. But are there any advanced technological ways? And I feel like this is the perfect commercial for Attesto. So maybe there already are, I don't know. But yeah, are there any ways like in technology right now that a recruiter could maybe look and see, okay, not that all recruiters know how to look up IP addresses or even back check them, but any ways that you would give maybe tips to recruiters now?
Yes, I mean, you could check, but that by itself is not, I mean, sure, if you know the IP address is from North Korea, that is very telling. But probably an actor from North Korea is not gonna use an IP from North Korea. It's gonna be using something sort of a VPN or like proxy and so forth. It's gonna basically use an IP address from somewhere else. And then the change in the IP address, sure, it can be helpful, but what if, I'm actually a good candidate and I apply and then I take a call or send something back to you when I'm traveling in Europe as well, right?
Yeah.
Like this change in the IP address by itself, which, the ATSs are, especially like Ashby, for example, or Lever, I mean, they're incorporating some table stake signals, but it's not sufficient at all. It's and this has been the strategy of ATSs, that they provide table stake features, like the minimum sort of features in every aspect for TA. And not every company needs a more sophisticated kind of fraud detection and trust solution. It depends, right? It depends what kind of business you have. Like, we're not seeing this crazy number of fraud everywhere, because there are like remote companies, for example, there are software companies, there are, like factories, like there are different types of companies. Like we are seeing fraud, like flavors of fraud everywhere. And there's the Gartner report in 2028, like 1 in 4 candidate would be fake. In some cases, we are seeing right now, like 50% of seeming qualified candidates are fake or fraudulent, some flavors of fraud. But then there are also companies that they don't have that much. So in those cases, using ATS fraud signals is probably more than sufficient. I think educating is important. Like even if TA teams are using tools, or whether it's coming from ATS, if they're using companies that are working with ATSs like Attesto, I think they still have to be educated. I think more and more TAs are becoming talent strategists and advisors. I think they have to be in the forefront of what is happening in the market, and then they actually educate the hiring team as well, so that everyone is aware. And this way, if they are seeing a signal, they can use it. And then if they're using a tool, they can assess it, how good of a job it's doing. One of the things that actually really resonated with me a few weeks ago, I heard in a podcast with AI, like improvements and doing so much of our jobs, what is really remaining with us is judgment, like human judgment, right? So
Yeah.
we gotta and
Yep.
then just educating. I mean, I think the TA team should also be remain great judges, right?
No,
And
I
always
agree.
say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Attesto, we were talking about this a little bit about how you don't want to lose the good candidates too, right? You want the fraud to be detected, but you want to keep those good. It's sometimes where I get a little wonky with AI is because I still think there's a ton of bias that goes into some of these tools and all of those things. How does Attesto, so I'm assuming that as we talk about judgment, the judgment still is up to the TA recruiter or leader or whatever to make that final decision. Is that correct?
Yes. So what
Yeah.
Attesto is doing is doing all this research, collecting the signals, using the models, because looking at thousands of data points every day and collectively like millions of data points, like it learns that, okay, like right now these things are happening. Like if you have like this form of Outlook and then also there's a voice over IP, there's this mismatch. It's like nothing on Google. So like, okay, it learns that there are so many signals to call a candidate suspicious of fraud, right? And in that case, it would say, okay, this candidate is suspicious of fraud because of these reasons. Provides full transparency, provides the reasons why Attesto thinks that this is suspicious of fraud. So the way TA teams are using Attesto in their workflow, they filter not just for Attesto 5 stars, like qualified ones, but for Attesto clear ones, meaning that they use it as a productivity tool when they're looking at thousands of applications in the pipeline, first focusing on the candidates that seem to be like clear, right? And then they find this way they save the time. They don't have to do a lot of, kind of research and see, okay, are these good candidates, are authentic and so forth. Then, they could, if they want to, they could also go and look at the suspicious pools as well. So again, the decision is with the TA team. This is more of, kind of providing the notes, providing the research so that they save the time. And, the big goal is cutting the time to hire, right? Hire fast. But you still have them in the pool. And then Attesto also has ways now to interact. So if the company chooses, Attesto could have an interaction with the candidate to collect more signals. So, for example, if the candidate is suspicious of fraud, could also verify himself, and this way becomes clear. So that's
that
a
was
way
my
that,
final question. That makes
yeah,
sense to me. Like I'm suspicious of fraud, but I can prove it type moment, I think. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I can prove I am who I am
And I think,
type of thing. Because I could see it happening.
yeah. And I'm almost kind of curious, and this is just me, again, being a nerd. Do you find any trends with your tool? Meaning, like, is it more often that if you have a more common name, John Smith, something like that, you're more likely to be voted as clear quicker than someone who is Tanisha Godwin or something like that? Like, is it something to where there could be implicit bias brought into the tool just because of the way that our names are culturally?
no. We are, I mean, even when we were just doing, because Atessa also does fit assessment, even if we were doing that, it was very clear what are the criteria that are used. So it's not doing a black box pattern matching. This was always very important to me, like from the beginning when I was building the company, because not just for fraud, but, for all the assessment tools, like the first wave of AI tools that were using very much black box lookalike pattern matching.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important for us that the criteria are clear and there is a human in the loop. So you could also, even for fit assessment, you can see it, it's transparent, and you can make adjustments to it. Interestingly, we are not using it for fraud, but interestingly, actually, the fraud cases that we are seeing are more common popular names, because those
I
like
was
fraud actors,
curious.
like let's say sitting in like, and using like a John Smith
Yeah.
because they want to impersonate something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's honestly what I was
Sense.
curious, because it's also harder to track a John, because it's like, okay, well, 9,000 of
John
you
Smith.
now all live
Right.
in New York, New York. Yeah. So that's why I was curious, like if you had seen any trends of like the actual output or outcomes of what the tool classifies each as. But that's kind of interesting.
We
That's cool.
are it's an evolving problem, right?
Yeah.
That's why with everyone that we work with, we say we are partners and collaborator. We want the TA teams to provide feedback, not just for how Attesto is built, but with the outcome. Because that human in the loop is very important, so they can override
Yeah.
it for their own processes. But then by providing the feedback, you will also monitor and make sure that it gets sort of better and in a transparent way over the time. But it is a new problem. So we can't say that we built it like last year, it's great, and it's going to stay the same. So we are also evolving
Yeah.
and we are making changes because the problem is changing, and
Yeah.
we are just there and we want to make sure that, again, we help the candidates and we help the teams, and we want to partner with TA teams because this way, we can do a better job to help them, but they're also contributing.
Where do
Yeah.
you think AI is going in hiring? Where do you see it, like, in the next 5, 10 years? And I know it's hard to judge because it's moving so fast. I shouldn't even use 10 years. I should say, where is it
Yeah.
in the
We'll be
next two
holograms, girl.
years? Where
Yeah.
do you think, Maryam, it's going to evolve to in the next 2 years? I'm going to give you 2 years.
I think already resumes are becoming obsolete. So probably there would be no resume the way we know it. It would be sort of way more dynamic the way teams are building an understanding of a candidate. So that's definitely like I can bet on that. Would be a lot more kind of interactions with the candidate in a way that not just for authenticity, but like figuring out, okay, if this candidate could be good at the job, simulating the job environment and so forth. Probably like there would be more ways of, instead of having these like one point at a time doing a resume or a reference, would be more ways to collect these experiences and kind of verified experiences and skills for the candidate so that they could be sort of assessed by that when they want to grow in their same company or find a different job. So those are the things that I would say. And then there's like a very close collaboration with AI. So I think that's another thing that, because overall it's not just trust in hiring, it's a trust for work, how we would really help companies to trust their employees, because we also see people get hired without lying but then outsource their work.
Yeah.
So they get hired but then give the work to someone, there's like a BD guy, business development, but outsource it to Philippines or outsource the
I
software
actually had
development.
somebody who did that. I worked somewhere and I worked with this person for like 2 years, and she was outsourcing all her stuff to, I
Pivot.
forget
Good
which,
for
it was another
her.
country. I can't remember the country yet. But I was like, girl, you're just chilling on the beach? Like, what's going on?
Hey.
And she like outsourced everything. And I think it was India. But it was like, it's just fascinating to me that people think of these things. It's like evil genius.
It's not even, girl, that is literally what capitalism in America is they're all
I know.
exporting their things they need to do to someone else. The only thing that makes a
I mean,
difference is like this
it
person
was
isn't a
classic.
CEO, so it's like frowned upon that they're working multiple. And it's like all these rich city cats, they have all these, they're on 5 different boards,
Right.
they do all the, but hey, but no,
Right.
you little lowly getting hourly, don't you dare put this out to someone else and make a daisy chain of profit, because no,
I
no, no.
thought it was evil genius.
Oh, it's smart.
It
It's
was
brilliant.
evil
I think being
genius. Yeah.
overemployed, it's my favorite middle finger to capitalism, dude. Sorry. I love it. I root for it. I hope more people do it. I know that's not what I'm supposed to say on this, but I genuinely, I think
I'm
it's the only way to game the system.
Yeah.
It's the
But
only way you're
you
going to
know
get on
what? I
top,
mean,
honey.
in my opinion, I think there gotta be and we also see a rise in hiring fractional employees and
Yes.
Yeah.
contractors,
Yes.
right? So I think there is a bit of a difference, and that's why the word trust, it has like such a broad
Yeah.
meaning. But when you are like the way that you're getting employed, like if the company trusts you and you're establishing that trust, so the way you're kind of using your time, is it for your work or is it for your time? Like, what
Yeah.
is the sort of the constraints that you have?
Yeah.
Like, you can outsource it to AI. Okay, how are you using AI, right? So that should
Right.
be
Yeah.
communicated, right? I mean, and I
Yeah.
think, yeah, if someone is like very capable and the company is okay that this person is outsourcing it, whether it's to AI or India, but it's done in a secure way, and yeah, what's wrong with that? Good for them.
Yeah. I mean, let's do it, right? I mean, let's get on it. I think it's fascinating. So Barry, I'm going to ask you one last question before we get into talent outside the box. But what are we missing here? Like, what didn't we ask you that we should have asked you? And what should we know about this? And how many companies? I would love to understand, probably offline, like how many people are really in this space doing what you do a little bit. But what are we missing here?
So what are we missing? I mean, I think
Yeah, like what question didn't we ask you? What, this is a new topic out here, right? This is a new space for everybody. And I feel like we could have probably written out a 5-page Bible of questions to ask you because
Yeah.
it's so new.
I
What
think,
would you like our audience to know?
yeah, what is missing is still, it's fascinating, even though people are talking about it on LinkedIn and in different articles. I talk with companies and they feel like they have a problem, but they don't think it's big. They think that, oh, maybe just like 5%. And then they still hire us and, start using Attesto. And then we start like flagging them and they're like, oh, we didn't think we have this many suspicious. And then sometimes we go deep and you're like, okay, let's look at them. And they
Right.
just see the scope of it, like how many sort of fraud cases they have. So I think people are not realizing how big this issue is. The second thing is they don't realize the cost of it. So it's not just, again, the time
Right.
that you spend on the interview. Sometimes you're exposing company information, confidential information to these actors. Because, in the interview, sometimes you share, right, that you're recruiting a person. Sometimes the way they ask questions, they are sort of doing social engineering to gain more insight. Then, there is the cost of onboarding someone who's been lying.
Right.
And, and then that this person, like after a few weeks, you realize something is off and then like it disappears. What does that, imply? Like there's like the morale, like it's a blow to the team. So it's kind of like you bring someone to your home and then you figure that, oh, this person has been a thief, right? So again, I'm not sure. We talk about capitalism and being efficient and whatever, but it's trust, right? So if a company, if a team trusts you, brings you on board, like this is your name, this is your background, this is what you're supposed to do. And then when this person's off, and then after a few months, you tell the team that, yeah, that person was just a fraudster. You feel violated. Even the team members feel violated, right? So I think companies don't really think, or teams are not fully thinking about the cost overall. We are now kind of gradually seeing the companies are looking at it more of as like a cyber security, like a security problem as well. So this is like the buyer of this or the interested party, not just the talent acquisition teams to work more efficiently, but it's also like the company as a whole, because you're kind of protecting that company from the security point of view and like the morale and so forth.
All right. Good stuff. Thank you, Maryam. This is the point of Talentless for all of you that have listened before, that we go into the cognitive or psychological side of what we've been talking about. And Ashley, I will let you take it away, talent outside the box.
All right, this one's going to be a little different, but it's mainly because of something that Maryam said, because I think it's pretty smart for us to know. And it is the terminology that you should, and I hope, hear more of if you're in the TA space working within AI and our processes and procedures. And that is called human in the loop. That means that if you're thinking about a circle, so here's my first decision I need to make, and now I'm going to go through all of the processes that it takes to make that decision. Before I close the loop to finalize that decision, there needs to be a human in it. That means that all of these decision-making patterns can be done through either automation or artificial intelligence, except for at least one portion. Usually the judgment or decision-making portion is what I would say would probably be your best bet. requires that a human be in that loop in order for a decision to be made. So you will hear this if you work with an AI or digital team, maybe even governance. They will often ask you, okay, you're making this bot for TA enablement. Is there a human in the loop? What they're asking you is, before this bot makes any final decisions, is there a human that will touch it to make sure that there is a decision made by them as well? Not just artificial intelligence, but actual human intelligence is present. And so if you hear that going forward in your career, just know, one, you're a cool kid because you're stomping on cool things, but two, it is also to ensure that there is reference to not a fully artificial intelligent loop, but one that also has the human brain involved as well. That's our very quick and simple talent outside the box. Again, that was
It
brought on
was
by
a
Maryam.
good one.
It was
It
off the
was a
cuff of my
good
head. It's because she
one.
said human in the loop, and I was like, I bet you a lot of people don't know what that is. It's an actual term.
I love it. I love it. Maryam, where can people find out about Attesto, find out about you, connect with you, all the things? It's your time to plug yourself.
Absolutely. Attesto.com is our website. And, you can just schedule a demo with us. We would love to share more. And it's not just about selling. Like, we would love to just partner with TA teams and get feedback. We're very much looking at this as a long-term collaboration. There's also, on LinkedIn, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm kind of more active there across social platforms. And my email, Maryam@attesto.com. Please reach out. Would love to have a conversation.
Giving away the email, Maryam.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo! You might be sorry for that one. Thank you so much. Just everybody remembers this conversation matters, because it's not just about hiring and at a volume and going faster. This is about trust, fairness, and accountability. Please remember that. Maryam, I want to thank you so much for joining us, which I think is turning into a scary environment for so many. I appreciate you being here. For all of you listening, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, follow us all wherever you get your podcasts, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.